It's Biden versus Trump. This is being called one of the most important elections of our time. Today is the final day for Americans to go to the polls and to vote in a new president or keep the current one for 4 more years. How will either outcome impact the Caribbean and its diaspora in the U.S.? To discuss this, we've invited Melissa Noel, a multimedia producer and travel correspondent of Guyanese origin, and Shauna Bernard, director of political partners at computer software company Hustle, who is originally from Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Thank you for having us.
I know it's very early for the both of you, so we're going to get right into it. Melissa, I'm going to start with you. You're based in New Jersey. What is the feeling like on the ground from the members of the Caribbean diaspora?
Yeah, well, the United States is home to over 4 million Caribbean people. And I bring that number up because we do have a significant role to play in this election, but oftentimes the Caribbean vote is not necessarily something that is paid attention to. However, with this election, we saw that change. People began to pay attention to the fact that Caribbean Americans are a really important voting bloc. And so the feeling right now, I think for a lot of people, especially here in the tri-state area, is one of, I think there's a lot of anxiousness. People want to see what's going to take place. But because we had early voting due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have some people voting in person today, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to happen, especially in our swing states where we do have a lot of Caribbean people, states like Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, what have you. So I think it's going to be a long day, and we may not necessarily have these results tonight as we would hope.
I see was it your turnpike or one of your bridges got blocked on the weekend?
So it was the Parkway in South Jersey, and I did hear about some things happening in New York City as well.
So let me ask you, what is the feeling amongst those members of the diaspora as far as their choice is concerned? Because when we think about the case with the Latin American community, you have they're not a monolith. You have so many different factions. You have the Cuban Americans, you have the Venezuelan Americans, you have and each of those blocks apparently, it would seem, tend to prefer different candidates. So we don't want to assume that the entire, Caribbean diaspora bloc is all in for any one candidate. Have you been getting varying views, or is it overwhelmingly towards one direction?
I think that's the great thing about, Caribbean people is we have that diversity, not only in origin, but of course in thought. So one of the biggest pushes, and why I'm so glad that Deshauna is here as part of this conversation, is that it was a bipartisan effort to get people out to vote. We wanted you to exercise your right, whatever way that may be. We want you to get out there and make your voice heard. Mm-hmm. So from what I've seen, there has been a lot of support for the Biden-Harris campaign. However, as we said, no group is a monolith. So there is support for the Trump administration as well, amongst some Caribbean Americans. But the fact of the matter is people are exercising their right to vote, and they're making their voices heard, whichever way that they want to do that. And we do have some really important things that are going to affect the Caribbean as well as the diaspora. Things like, the U.S. is the largest trading partner. Mm-hmm. The U.S. is the largest tourism source market. And of course, the U.S. has the largest Caribbean diaspora. So when we talk about things like remittances, when we talk about foreign trade, the Caribbean and its diaspora is going to be impacted no matter what. So the fact that we wanted to get people to say your vote does count in the Caribbean American voting bloc is one that people really do need to pay attention to.
Deshauna, I want to bring you in here. How much do you think having Kamala Harris as a part of the Biden ticket would have kind of woke Caribbean people up to say, oh, whoa, we got one of ours. Let's jump in. Do you think that would have some impact on just how much Caribbean people feel they need to come out and make a difference?
Yes, absolutely. I think we would be remiss if we miss this opportunity of kind of making our stake in saying that we acknowledge that Senator Kamala Harris is a part of the Democratic ticket for vice president, and she has Jamaican heritage. It certainly helped to fuel the excitement in some of the swing states that Melissa has talked about. The one thing I also want to say is that Caribbean Americans have always been engaged. They've always been active voters. We've always participated and exercise our right to vote. I think Senator Kamala Harris brings something else on a national level, and I will even say internationally, where we now have even the region paying close attention and watching how this plays out. So I'm excited about her being a possible vice president once we have the results, but I'm also excited about what this means for the community, us being a part of history and being embedded into the narrative in a long way. So while we have participated, like Melissa talked about, there have been places where we're not in the narrative, right? Our vote itself gets lost along the way. But now folks are leaning in to explore, what does Jamaican heritage look like? What does Caribbean ancestry mean? What is the power of the Caribbean American vote? So I'm really excited about the opportunity for us as a collective community here in the United States.
Yeah, Simone mentioned the Latin American community, and I feel the same about our Caribbean community, that we're all from one region, but here we have Deshauna from Guyana, Melissa from Trinidad. So do you find that within the Caribbean diaspora, we all have different concerns and different interests when it comes to matters of politics?
What I will say is being Caribbean American, we're all connected in this unspoken language. We're connected through our shared culture, our shared history, and I would even say our shared lived experience as immigrants in the United States. Yeah. That is what binds us. And while people vote based on their interests, people vote based on their party lines, we understand that this shared common values and history connects us across the board. And therefore, it allows us to come in this space as a community and have the conversations. I want to acknowledge the work of organizers who've been doing this work for years in Florida, doing this work for years in Georgia, that led us to this moment where we can all pivot and come together and say, like we acknowledge with Senator Kamala Harris, but also recognize this shift that's happening across the United States. I would even like to point out the fact that the US Census, for the first time, has allowed you to identify by country of origin. This is huge. Usually Caribbean Americans have kind of been cast under, just being Black American, but because of the US Census and now people having the ability to identify as a country of origin, it changes the landscape significantly as it relates to policy, as it relates to funding. So these conversations and mobilizing our community, it's high time, and it's the perfect time to start those conversations now, because we're not just talking about building for the presidential election, but life continues. Our lives will continue to be impacted by legislation post November 4th. So we're looking ahead into 2022 for our midterm elections, and we're also looking ahead into 2024 when we're doing this all over again.
Let me ask you, ladies, there's so many areas that this election will impact. Foreign policy and trade, climate change, immigration policy is a big one.
Huge deal. Race
relations. Ladies, how have you been, and what feedback have you been getting from the community where that has been playing out? That it's really interesting to see what's happening in the United States right now in terms of race relations. How have you been navigating that?
Yeah, I think from a reporting standpoint, immigration, race and culture are some topics that I cover quite regularly. And there's been a lot of concern around the current administration's moves to limit illegal immigration into the United States. So that's anything like your H-1B visa programs that bring a lot of people into the country for our tech industry jobs, healthcare jobs, agriculture, those kinds of things. So there's been a lot of concern around the limiting of legal immigration into the United States and what that is going to mean for Caribbean people, as well as the fact that we do have Americans who reside in the Caribbean region, and how is that going to affect the policy policies that we see moving forward. When it comes to race relations, this has been a really tumultuous year in the United States where police brutality and police-involved killings has been concerned. And one thing I will say is that from the standpoint of seeing a lot of Caribbean people across the region also protesting issues of race and issues of police brutality and standing with, things like Black Lives Matter movement and what have you, I think is something that we're going to continue to see because the problems don't end here. There are issues that need to be taken and listened to beyond this election and reform that's going to need to take place. And that's going to take all of us, especially because, we bring our families here, we raise children here, we have generations here. So it's important that we're engaged and involved. But there's a lot of concern about that. And the last thing, of course, is climate change, another big issue. We saw what Hurricanes Irma, Maria, and Dorian have done throughout the region. And these storms are only expected to intensify if we cannot get this under control. So it is really, really critical to have someone in office that is paying attention to not only how it's impacting the United States, these issues, but the rest of the world and how we're going to interact. And with so many Caribbean people in the US, as I mentioned earlier, and the fact that we have the largest diaspora in this country, it is critical that we remain engaged, ensure that you have people in office that are speaking to the interests of Caribbean people in this regard. And as Deshauna mentioned, this is just the beginning. The presidential elections are one thing, but if we're going to keep if you want to flip, when it comes to Congress, when it comes to our midterm elections, there's still so much that needs to be done. And we have to keep the Caribbean diaspora engaged beyond today.
Yeah. Deshauna, we have a minute. How much do you think the handling of COVID-19 will come to bear on people's decision today?
Well, we have seen that over 90 million Americans have already early voted and mailed in their ballots. In 2016, only 50 million Americans have done that. So that shows me that people are absolutely motivated to vote and get out to the polls. I think COVID-19, and I have said this, has created a very unique moment in history where people have really sat and reconciled, how has this impacted my life? How has the leadership of this country impacted my life directly? And who can I trust to ensure that they can navigate and steer this ship moving forward? And I think, like Melissa pointed out, to protests and different things that have been happening, and the response of direct action has really highlighted this big movement that has happened from the average person that was once sitting still and probably not saying anything and just tuning in and keeping up with the news, to now being very vocal about how they feel, showing up in the streets or calling their congressional leaders to ask about what is your budget looking like? Are you going to assist? Are you going to vote in support of the stimulus check because it's going to impact my life? People are looking at this very practically. They're looking at the fact that their mortgage and rents are due. They're looking at the fact that healthcare is on the ballot. They're looking at the fact that justice is on the ballot. They're looking at the fact that student loans is on the ballot. So the everyday issues that are impacting everyday lives, just like it impacts us no matter where we are, is on the ballot. And I believe that because people are going to show up in record numbers, and we're just going to hold our breath and sit still to see what happens at the end. As Melissa pointed out, we're not going to have results tonight, and we want to continue to kind of uplift that. The results are not going to be ready tonight, but the work begins no matter what, post November 4th.
Ladies,
so I'm excited about what this means.
Final question to you both then. Who do you think is going to take the election?
I think that's a really tough call. Right now, there's still so much uncertainty around it. I think we may see something pretty close, but I'm not sure at this point.
Okay. Staying safe, Melissa. Deshauna?
Yeah, I'm also staying safe on this, but obviously it's very clearly where my hat aligns. I am a proud Democrat, so I'm rooting for Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris until the end. So of course, I think that if anything, this ticket is going to bring a significant moment in history and have people show up. In 2016, I will bring out that this came down to 77,000 votes in 3 states. That's what it came down to.
Electoral college.
Melissa, we're just going to hold, and then I guess you're gonna be able to see what happens as well, just as we're watching.
For sure. So you hold your breath, we'll hold our breaths, but we also have to breathe. So I don't know how we're gonna do both, but
definitely.
I'll try and figure out a way. Thank you very much. Ladies, I know you'll be
Thank
working
you.
hard today, so stay safe and all the best to the both of you. Melissa Noel, multimedia producer and travel correspondent, and Deshauna Bernard, director of political partners at computer software company Hustle. Getting our
Yes.
voices heard.
Yeah.
Caribbean diaspora, you know we're good for that.
Very important.
Yes.
Very important.
Okay.
Nice.
This is
We'll
a
see
good
what happens
segue.
later
This is a
on.
good segue into this.
Yes. What is mindfulness and how can it help with anxiety? We're going to probably have a lot of that today. That's what we're discussing after the break.
Oh,
Please
gosh.
stay with us.